Welcome back to Final Sector, everyone. We're here with our 2023 F1 season predictions. This one's been particularly tough for me. How have you gone, Kyle, with drumming up your predictions for this year?
Well, I was having a bit of trouble, and then I put on my lucky thinking cap, I got a few ideas brewing.
Really?
So, I think we were saying before, Scope this year maybe feels a little more difficult than last year, where you could really throw a bunch of left ball as it is out there, and because of just the regulations changing in the new year of F1, you could really just guess something out there and people will go, probably that could be right. Well, this year it feels it's hard to do that. You still know certain things are going to move, but we've kind of had the groundwork laid now, so there's only, so many areas that can shift. So certainly took a little longer, I think, to come up with a few to then pick from, but still happy with what I've got, and more so just excited to see what you've got.
Yeah, I had... as you know, I've been talking about how I had a lot of trouble with a couple of these. It definitely feels more status quo-y than last year for obvious reasons.
That's a good word, status quo-y. That's how I would put it.
Yeah, that's a word.
Yeah. No, I like it though. It works.
Yeah.
Because we don't think it's going to be full status quo, but again, things can only shift so much unless something unlikely happens, which can happen, but then you're just shooting needles in a haystack to try and figure that out.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, as always, we start with our 3 bold predictions before we go into a series of categories. We'll lead us off. Kyle, we'll start. What is your first of 3 bold predictions for this season?
All right, so maybe this sets the tone a bit of, I suppose, what's the word? My positive outlook towards this year, about how last year, despite the fact that you could look at it in a vacuum and say there was a lot of domination, it still felt quite close at times. And a lot of those that were struggling, aka Mercedes and Ferrari, in that, maybe you feel like they're more going to pick up the pieces going forward. So off that, I've gone back to something we haven't seen in a while, which is that coming into the final race of the year, I think that 3 drivers will still be in contention to win the title.
Ooh, interesting.
So I won't say which 3, and I suppose that's because when we talk about our order, that kind of will reveal it a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we haven't had it for a while, just because of how things have turned out. And even when it's been close, it's only really been 2 drivers from different teams, or same team if we're unlucky in that regard. But I feel like this could be the first real year where actually we have a few still in there to the very end, even if 2 of them are close and one has an outside shot, I feel like we're closer to that than we have been for quite a few years.
Yeah, I would agree. I guess in a similar vein, I'll go on to my first bold prediction as well. 3 teams will be in genuine championship contention at Mexico or later. So, this is not... You know how when they say they're mathematically in contention of the title, but it's only if the team that's third is they get 1-2, and then everyone else literally got nothing. Yeah. So no, this is a 3 teams will be in genuine championship contention from Mexico, which I think is 4 races from the end, or later. So we'll talk about which 3 will be. You'll hear which later on, though it might not be a surprise.
Well, you never know.
But yeah, that's my bold prediction. So I guess it's similar but slightly different.
It's scary. We kind of went down different directions here, but same kind of vein. Yeah. That's cool.
Given what we're going off last year with how close it was initially, and then another team coming through really late, I think it's very possible that we could have a very, very good team fight at the top this year. I think it's very, very plausible. Do you want to go on to your second one?
This one is probably my safer of the 3, and if I was called out and not being bold enough, I could tune it a bit. But I've basically gone with that Lando Norris and one other non-top 3 manufacturer driver will win a race during the year.
Oh, okay.
So I feel like Norris is the easier pick. If I had to commit to another driver, there'd be a pool I'm picking from, but I'm
No, I think that's bold enough.
Yeah.
I think that's more than bold enough.
I'll take it then.
Yeah. What other manufacturers did you have in mind?
I think it could even be an Ocon or an Alonso, kind of that territory.
Okay.
So there's a few there. I guess Piastri isn't that far behind in theory, if I'm guessing Lando. But again, I feel like even considering last year where we didn't really have, he was the only one to get a podium, you know. So I'm thinking no, I think Lando definitely, but then I also think someone else. I don't think it'll be just him.
Okay.
Outside of the top, I guess the top 3 standard teams of the last year. Let's say, right?
Yeah.
So
No,
we
I
won't
think
just say
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. No, I think given last year where there was only the one P3 from outside those top 3 teams, and it was Lando, and it only just sort of happened. Like early in the year, I think it's a very bold prediction to say. I think even Lando winning one is probably bold at this stage, but yeah, I'd love to see it. I want to go back to seeing the odd, like in previous years, even though we've had the dominance, we had the odd, we had the Gasly win, or we'd have the the Ocon win, or these random ones that just sort of come out of nowhere. Well, not out of nowhere, but like certain circumstances happen.
Well, they kind of are, because circumstances come out and then suddenly they're in a spot, right track, right weather.
Yeah. They make for really, really good races, because then you have these the big players out of the picture, or they're way down there, or they're fighting through, and then you have these sort of midfield teams that are up in front,
are holding on for dear life.
Yeah, so like I kind of missed that from last year. We didn't really have that. We had obviously different.
Well, we said a big part of that was because we didn't just have 2 teams or 2 drivers at the top. We had 3 teams kind of at the top, which changed a lot. Definitely. So even though I think we'll have a similar thing coming to this year, I still think we're more likely to see, those lower down teams have their day than last year.
Yeah.
And I think it'll occur, I guess, more than once in this regard. Look, if Lando wins 3 and no one else wins any, I still technically don't get it, but I'll take that as like a quarter point or something.
No, that's fine. I'd be happy either way. But
yes.
Yeah, this one's kind of a twofer for me. But I believe there will be further separation between the top 3 teams and the midfield. But that midfield battle is going to absolutely slap. Like, I think it's going to be really crazy. I think there's going to be a lot of teams in that mix. I think it's going to be jumping all over the place all the time. I think it's going to be a really, really good one to watch.
That's good.
But I also think, like I said, there's going to be a bit more of a jump between those top 3 teams and the rest. But in that same vein, obviously, with my first prediction, I think that battle's going to be closer, and then the midfield battle's going to be closer, even if there is a bit of a wider gap. So that one's a bit of a general, broad one. But
I can see how you quantify it.
Yeah.
Because we got a pretty good vibe of that last year, how it seemed to be trending there. So your case is, look, that'll further just trend as is. So I can see how we can quantify that.
As much as obviously everyone wants and thinks that it's going to bring, as the teams get more on top of the rules, is going to come closer and closer. I think those top 3 teams at the moment just have the resources to be able to, and they have the starting point already.
Yes.
To where I think initially for the first year or 2 they could just sort of start streaking ahead. But yeah, I still think it's going to give us a good season with those two battles there.
Probably the most boring, and I've been umming what number I want to put here. I'll go with 3. So I'm going with that 3 non-core drivers will feature in place of other drivers during the race this year.
Okay.
So in case of sub-ins or fill-ins or whatever. I was umming between 3 or 4, but I think 4's too much. Like, if it was still in hyper COVID era, then it's more likely, but I feel like it's not. But I still think we'll see a few throughout the year, so I'm gonna go with 3. I think your likes of, potentially Danny Rick or others, right? Like, is kind of what makes you spark it off. But again, when you think of previous years, it does happen now and then, more because of COVID, which is less a thing. But I still think there may be a trend there. I guess that also includes if a driver for some reason gets booted out. I suppose it kind of covers that too, which there could be some of with some changes around and that. So
is that foreshadowing?
Is
that foreshadowing? Yeah.
So that's my final guess anyway. I try. That's kind of where I ran out of creativity. And I went, look, this is what I've got.
Yeah.
And it works, but again, the difficulty of trying to get some banger predictions.
Yeah, it does seem quite a bit harder, but at least this year we haven't gone the same. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for this. Well done. So my third prediction is of the 6 teams that have new drivers, 4 of them will have their new driver beat them on points. So this is like,
okay.
I was gonna go 3, and then I'm like, nah, 3's not bold enough. I'm gonna go 4. So
I was gonna go down a similar path, and then I scrapped it. So I'm glad that I did, because the form that you just put that in is the perfect way I was trying to summarize it. I kept going, this just doesn't work.
Right,
so that's brilliant. I love how you put that. And I'm glad that I shelved it.
Cool. Yeah. So
but the open nature of it, that's cool. No, that's creative.
Yeah. No, that's one I actually had pretty early on. So I was again tossing up between whether or not I should go 3 or 4. There's 1 or 2 that I think are very, very likely. There's 1 or 2 that I think are very unlikely. And then there's 1 or 2 that are like, or 2 or 3 maybe that are like, it could happen. I think there's a world that I could see it happening. So
yes,
which is why I'm like, I think 4 is a good number. That's probably my boldest, because drivers going to new teams, it's obviously shown to be very, very hard. And especially with new drivers, we've got obviously 3 rookies coming in as well. It is going to be tough, but I think for the drivers, just the driver lineup in general, I think the strength is incredible. I think it's probably the strongest it's been in a few years at least.
Yes.
So I think there's a very good
It doesn't
chance.
feel like we have a true pay driver rookie running around.
It doesn't feel like it, yeah.
And we may result to have one, but going into it, as you say, it's the first time in a while you've gone, there's not a... I don't want to name names, but names, Russian drivers or otherwise.
Who could he mean? All right, we'll go into our categories now. Pretty much the same categories from last year with the return of Rookie of the Year, now that we have 3 rookies. But yeah, we'll start with the Wooden Spoon drivers and teams. We'll start with driver. Who have you got as your unfortunate Wooden Spoon driver, Kyle?
I'll just go with it. So I've gone with Mr. Logan Sargent, who's coming in. In terms of the prediction that you were going for in terms of teammates beating each other, part of it was sparked by a prediction that he would potentially beat his teammates. So in a way, I also didn't really want to go with that and then go with that he'd be the bottom, because I'm kind of contradicting myself in a way. So I think less on him. I would be shocked if we had another kind of Latifi situation again, where he dropped back. I mean, of course it can happen, but I think even if he is kind of jumping in there with a bit of marketing ploy, being American and such, I still think he's a fine talent who's quite young and has real possibility to grow and do something amazing on his day. It's more, I guess, on where I think the field will be, and even if it tightens up, there's still dark clouds maybe about the car that he's driving, and so if it's kind of a mix between him, his teammate, and maybe 1 or 2 others from some other teams, I still think it'll be him, but not by a country mile, which is ironic because I got it wrong last year as well, even though now I'm saying, that was easy in retrospect, but still, that's why I've gone with him.
Yeah. So it's really funny because like the entire time you were talking, it's exactly the same thoughts that were going through my head. When it came to this, even with the bold prediction, it's exactly the same, where I have also gone Logan Sargent, by the way. I also think that there is a good chance he could beat Alex Albon, which again, it's hard to put him here because he could be one of those.
Yes.
And I don't think that Williams will be a million miles off. I actually think they'll be closer than they were last year. I just think that car is not... The car and the team are not in... It's not in a good position right now. I think with someone like James Allison, coming in, I think he could rebuild the team given all his experience at Mercedes. Like he was basically...
But we ain't going to see that in the first year.
Exactly,
he basically came on when everything's done. So he's kind of building with what he's got and going forward with it. And for all we know, it could be another Paddy Lowe situation where nothing actually happens. And it's like, well, just get him out and rotate him.
Yeah, so I think that's... Yeah, again, same thoughts. It's like, it's not going to happen this year. I think they were too far gone for this year to really make any big strides. And I think other teams have started, their real main competitors, which were Alfa Romeo and Haas at the time, they've made leaps and bounds, and their starting position is already way ahead of where Williams were. Williams are playing big catch-up, and that's not going to happen in 1 year. So, unfortunately, I have put Sargent there. it was a real toss-up between him and Albon. I just think the experience of Albon will probably push him over. But
And to be fair, his year last year when we reviewed it,
was
in
quite good.
That
yeah.
Williams was a car that wasn't consistent, but on its day when it had a chance, Albon capitalized on that and he took it when other drivers wouldn't. They would have fallen 11th, 12th, but on those days he did get his 8th and his 9th when he had a chance. So you don't see that really changing, and I think that's the challenge for Sargent. But I think every pointer says he could be doing that as well, which would be brilliant for the team. So
yep, definitely. So let's gloss over the next one really quickly here. We got to win spin team.
I've gone with Alpine. Oh no.
Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Yes. Yes. Williams. I think. For the same reasons. Again, I don't think even last year they were a million miles off. I know that people expected a big jump. You and I included by our predictions from last year. But there's no reason why they should fall back, because it's not like a case where like they've had investment which should be in full swing now, and they've got, what you say is a decent lineup, probably the most decent on both sides they've had for quite a while now. So you'd say they should be up there, but if everyone's starting from the same spot and there's no real free gimmies or even things with the cost cap now means that a team can't wiggle their way through something magical as easy, or a team can't suddenly underspend and overspend, because generally now they're spending even across the board. So for that reason, there's no reason why you'd pick others. Their probability is just the highest of them all. We don't have any other signs, news. We don't have news that someone's factory is burnt down to say, oh, they're going to be struggling, right? So I think that's why we got to go with them.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's very plausible that they could come back in future years. I feel like I said this last year as well, but I think to come back from where they were last year, this year straight away, I think it's probably just a bridge too far. I think they need to just use this year as more data, kind of like how Haas did, maybe to less an extent, where they just use it as data gathering and just learning the car and just working towards the following year and building up a young driver in Sargent.
Exactly, and it's not like that big a jump they have to take either, like Haas or even they were a few years ago. But again, if they were going to jump up, they would have done it last year. They did it a little last year to keep up, but they didn't really have that jump, so you wouldn't then see why that would be any different this year.
Yeah, and I think that there's very possible, again, I think there still will be some races where they will be in a good position, and then they can, I think they've got two drivers that could, assuming Sargent obviously picks it up relatively decently, which I think he'll do okay. Take advantage of a car that's just fast on that day, and I think they could be in the mix. I just don't think they're going to be in the mix often enough. So
agreed.
But anyway, that's Wooden Spoon. I feel like every year we're always on the same wavelength, despite like never really talking about that at all. It's weird. Interesting. Anyway, let's move on to the newly returned rookie of the year. So we've got three rookies this year in Oscar Piastri, Logan Sargent, and Nick De Vries. All three, I think, it's probably the biggest entry of rookies since Albon, Norris, Russell, I would think. When they came through, they were probably slightly more hyped because they were 1, 2, 3 in GP2.
Yes.
But I think in terms of the strength of these rookies coming through, I think there is a lot of potential in all three of these.
I don't think it's not an easy pick.
It's not, no. Yeah, I had a little bit of a think about this. I've actually had this one for a little while, just so I could come back to it every so often and be like, do I still think this is going to be the case, or should I change it? And I think it's a pretty certain thing for me. I don't know. I've gone with Nick De Vries. I just think, given he's only had the one race, he obviously had in that Williams, he performed outstandingly. He's been with so many teams in development or reserve driver roles all the way through. I think people are looking at Piastri as this golden child, and I think Nick De Vries is in the background, and he's just sort of going to be this understated. He's going to come through. I think he's just going to be incredible. I think he's absolutely going to blitz it. I think he's going to be worlds better than Piastri and Sargent. I can't see a world where he doesn't do well, if I'm honest. So I've gone with Nick. I'm curious to see if you've gone the same or if you've gone different.
No, I like your reasoning too.
Yep.
So I've gone with The one you haven't mentioned, Nico Hulkenberg. No, that
Holy
doesn't
shit.
count. Even if he did count, I don't think I would pick him. I'll put
He's
that
a
there.
young driver. Yeah.
This is when I tear my shirt off and show the other Force India shirt with Hulkenberg
Hell
on it. No. So yeah, similar thought pattern. I mean, I've talked up, I know with you one-on-one for years and in a while about Piastri and about how I've been following him for a while and I like his racecraft, his talent. I think he's exciting. However, I have gone the same with you and chosen De Vries.
Interesting. Okay.
For the same reasons. I think Piastri could very well smash it out. We could have another Van Dorn situation. You really don't know. I certainly think he's deserving of the spot, and I love the kind of controversy and everything that his management has done with him. I think that's brilliant, and I love a bit of a spicy F1 clown show in the background, as we all do. So I think that'll be really exciting to see how he does, but when we're doing predictions, I think we generally pick safer rather than trying to go for, like, so if we were trying to go risque, we'd go Sargent. Let's go wild card, But I'm like,
I did give him a consideration.
Yes, I don't. He's not. No, he's not out of the shot. No, for sure. But I think I just echo what you said about De Vries. I think even just overlooking past that weekend, which he came in, which was still pretty stellar for what he did for, the weakest car on the grid that he'd never driven before when he was back, he's supposed to be the Mercedes reserve driving their cars and yet he has to adapt to an inferior car, right? And he did well. Outside of that, I mean, he did very well in Formula E, which I follow pretty closely, and he was amazing in that, which we've seen lots of drivers, it's a completely different driving skill set, but still it's, even good F1 drivers have been poor there. So the fact he's been able to adapt to that well when he was thrown in quite late in this series and yet he adapted very quickly shows that, he's very quick to adapt, which I think is an underrated skill in F1. We've seen some drivers, Danny Rick and such, rise and fall because they have a niche and they can't do it. He's already coming in showing he's very adaptable, which I think if he's working through a team going through a lot of change like AlphaTauri, he's going to need that. And he just seems the most stable pick. So it might be boring, we're going with the same, but yeah, I plucked him out as well.
Yeah, cool. I was expecting it to go different. I'll be honest. So
okay.
It's interesting that
well, I did, but you excluded him from the.
Oh,
the
sorry.
So I had to change.
No, sorry. We'll go back and edit it and say 4 drivers, and we can add Hulkenberg, and then we'll cut the rest. All right. Well, let's move on to our most improved / standout driver, and I guess given what I said about the last category, it won't be any surprise I've gone with Nick De Vries.
Okay.
I think he's going to be a standout driver this year. I think he's going to come in and I think he's going to stamp his authority on the grid and be like, hey, I'm here to stay. I think AlphaTauri have a lot to prove as a team given last year as well. I think Tsunoda has a lot to prove. But I think there's a good chance he can blow Tsunoda out of the water in that, given what you said about how he works well with the team, how he's adaptable. He seems to be very good at developing a car, which is something that they need as well. I think it's probably pretty likely that they might tailor it more towards him if he's giving the right information, which it seems like he's the kind of guy to do that.
And if they see him as higher for the next few years as well.
Exactly, yeah. So I think there's a very good chance he could be the standout driver of the season. Add a couple of others in there, but again, with how well I think De Vries is going to do, I had to put him in this category as well.
So I think when we talked about this category, I think I initially felt iffy about giving it to a rookie. So although I totally agree with your sentiment, I still stuck to my guns. I'm like, I won't give it to a rookie. I'll give it to someone existing.
Okay.
I think it'll be 2 characters. The way I approached it is I suppose I looked at, again, who has the most potential, and it really came down to 2, which was Zhao Guanyu or Pierre Gasly. I think both you can see why. I think that Zhao Guanyu had a fine first season, but he still left a lot to go, hey, if things are actually tied up in the garage for him, then we should see his true potential if you believe it's there. Meanwhile, Gasly had a few killer years, and yet partly through you could argue his own efforts and the car really didn't get to shine, and he's now moving team. I think the battle between him and Ocon will be a story, if any story is going to happen, for a litany of reasons. So my thoughts came down to one of those two, and even looking at it, I'm still
not
I
sure.
still am tricky to pull it.
Is it still got Joe / Gasly on there?
Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
Brilliant.
I think I will give it to Guan Yu Zhao. I see it. I think that for Gasly to get it, he would have to come in and beat Ocon, I suppose. Even if that car may move up and Ocon performs well, I don't know, like, because Gasly almost to improve needs to improve back to his old form and then some, right? Which he well could do with this move, and I think that's his idea, and that's what Alpine want for him. But I feel like it's going to be a tough customer to go against Ocon, especially when we saw how well he did against Alonso. Even if they did play nice, I'm not talking about because they're going to be evil and he's going to struggle with the stress. And I think pure performance and on-track performance, I think it's less likely for him compared to Zhao, who I think didn't get to shine last year. And even if he did, I think he still might have been under his pace a little bit, similarly to how maybe someone like a Piastri or a Sargent might be this year. So starting off fresh with a new year with hopefully a fresh car, I think he can actually prove himself to go that, hey, I'm not just here for a 2-year stint, then I'm gone. I'm here for a longer term. Of course, that team is morphing into something else, so he's got to also prove his name to see if the stakeholders are worth keeping him on for that too. So I feel like he's got the guts to do it. I feel like I did him dirty last year by not backing him and throwing him under the bridge, despite that I liked him as an F2 driver. So I'm going to make up for it, and I'm going to put my money on him.
Let's move on to most improved team then.
I have gone with one that people might have picked for this category a few years in a row, and we're not going to get disappointed again, but I've gone with Aston Martin. I think this is less because they're doing a bit of a driver change-up, because I know part of the momentum can be people saying, well, Alonso signed for it, therefore obviously he sees something he likes, which I think is valid, but then that's the same thing we heard from Vettel, and then we saw how that ended up, which he still did fine, but it's not like there was that surge to constant podiums that maybe some people were hyping up, which could be similar to how people are hyping up this Alonso move. But again, when you think about this category, it's a bit like, where are they at from the last year or the year before kind of vibe. Where can they max from their potential? And I think although we may see some teams in general improve, I think they have the most realistic potential to improve above their kind of overall season last year. And part of it is they did finish quite strong as well, despite having quite a plagued and messy kind of first 3 quarters, if you like. So I think, again, if that car is performing, then I don't see any reason why Alonso wouldn't be performing as well as of end of year last year Vettel is. Stroll is a bit undetermined, but again, if the car's well, then you can't really blame the driver. So it's not like if he's bidding it, if the car's still great, I'm going to go, well, I'm still going to award them this because the team did well. This is less the driver, I suppose. So that's why I've gone with them anyway.
I had quite a few in this category, actually. This was a tough one for me. It's probably one of the last ones I chopped and changed around before coming to a decision. And I was going to go really bold on this, and I ended up playing it safe. And I think, again, with how much I've talked up De Vries and all that, and where AlphaTauri finished, I had to put them in the most improved team. I think they had just such a nothing season last year. They finished second last, which is considering where they were.
And no one even realised until we looked at the standings and went, oh, there they are. Okay.
So
which hasn't happened for a while. They're normally known for having those underdog performances, and for the first time in many years, it felt like we saw none. So
exactly.
The potential is there.
I think that's it. The potential is there. We know what the team is capable of, and I think there's a good chance they could come back through. I don't know how much. It's a real tough one because I can't see if there are teams that are going to improve, it's not going to be, like you say, this huge jump. It's going to be small gains across the board.
Yes.
There was a few other teams that I had in there. I had Mercedes in there as a possibility.
I thought you were actually going to say them when you started going. He's going to pick the Merc.
It was on my mind. I had Alfa Romeo in there as well, given where they ended last season. I had, who else did I have in there? I'm sure I had more thoughts in there, but there was just a few that I had reasonable arguments for. But yeah, I think just where AlphaTauri finished, I think it's needed for them to have probably the biggest jump. So yeah, I've gone with them. In the opposite fashion, let's go with the most underperforming team for this year. Again, this is more due to expectations or, sort of where they were tracking. Who underperforms the most compared to previous years. Again, had a couple for this one. This is another tough one for me. I ultimately ended on Haas, which is it's even tough for me to say that. This is another one, again, I don't think if people are going to drop back, it's going to be really small. It's only probably going to be because some improve a little bit and maybe some stay a little bit more stagnant, and that's why they underperform.
And because everyone's so close, a little movement can shove you down so much.
And because I think that midfield battle is going to be so spicy. I think, again, Haas still, they have the potential. I am looking back into their history a little bit where they did very similar things, where their qualifying pace, very, very strong. Race pace, they would just drop back, and then they're out of the points, and then they're nowhere. It's kind of happening again from what I saw last year. It's kind of like history repeating itself, and I'm just like, I can kind of see it. I think they have the resources this time to sort of manage it a bit better to where they're not going to be like miles back. I think they've got a steady driver lineup to develop it a little better, but I do think that it just feels like it's trending the wrong direction for them. Just
and
slightly.
You have to. That's the difficulty is you have to pick someone. So you have some tangibility. You say they have that almost.
Yeah.
Seems to be really they can only really set it up for quali and don't really know how to also adapt it so it works in the race. They kind of just roll the dice, which has always been a trend for them.
Yeah.
And on top of that as well, it seems to be that when there's a reset, they seem to start quite high. And they seem to kind of drop down after that, despite, them riding on a high going, let's keep this. Part of, I guess, why that might not happen is because they originally blamed the cost cap for that and saying we only get to spend a tiny bit, so we just spend every 5 years big and then we just run on it, right?
Yeah.
So I guess there's some argument there. But I agree the trend of the car, especially if everyone's going to be so close in racing, and I guess cars can race easier now too, so it's not like you can just fart out dirty air and then everyone's stuck behind you and you can use that to your advantage because you qualified well. Although on certain circuits, track position is still important. Yeah. It's kind of out the window now where really track position doesn't matter anywhere near as much. It's really how your car works in race pace and how good your drivers are. So I see why you've picked them. Yeah, yep, that's good.
Cool. Which sounds like you've gone differently, which I'm very curious with.
So this was my hardest one, and I still... Because as you say, it's really hard. Because I guess there's some context, I guess, of how I view as an individual each team for last year. Because I guess you can look at it strictly from a championship order perspective, but then there's still kind of trends for each team where you saw them.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and how strong they were. So I had two contenders which I thought were most likely. Haas was not one of them.
Interesting. Okay.
That could be because, I guess, if you classify them higher because of their potential last year, then sure. But I guess I classify them more as mid-low field in terms of their average potential. And I don't think they're really going to slip from that. Partly, I guess, because of some of the reasons I gave before to talk about your decision.
Yes.
So the two I had were Alfa Romeo and Alpine. I say Alfa because, again, I think in terms of finest margins, it's hard for me to see many teams falling. And I think although from an operating perspective, they dropped the ball last year, they still had a pretty damn quick car.
Yeah.
And they kind of came out of the gates because we both slated them before the year saying, what are they doing? And then they surprised. But then you got to say, well, are they going to keep at that just raw car performance level, which is tricky. And then on the Alpine side, I think if I'm looking at teams that are somewhat likely to fall from a big height, it will kind of either have to be like Ferrari falling down. I don't think that's the case. And then McLaren or Alpine. And I think McLaren have shown enough now that even if they fall a bit, it's just a bit. It's not a lot, and then they get back up there. While Alpine, I think, still has that potential where they're not like locked in now to go, now they're on that McLaren trajectory. They're always just going to be there. They could kind of fall down. So It's again, I still haven't really decided, even though I had decided. Now I'm just like bollocks. I don't know anymore.
Yep.
I think I will go. I know. I think I will go Alfa Romeo. I think even though I think that Guan Yu Zhao will show enough to show that he's improved as a driver, I still think the general form of the car will drop more than others will. I guess I see almost them and Haas at a similar spot in terms of performance. So I guess either one of them could fall back. And to your point, I hadn't really thought about Haas too much, but now I can see how they're in a similar bubble. But I'll go with Alfa Romeo. But I think it's really hard.
It's
and I suppose the point of the cost cap and everything is so teams can't suddenly lose out if they've got the right people and team in that,
exactly.
to a big degree, and there's less ebbing and flowing. So. Yep. This will be an interesting one. It's going to be tricky. Yeah,
I think unless there's a really big drop from one team, I think it's going to be an interesting discussion at the end. Or
someone completely changed direction and that direction's crap, and they've got to change back. It's possible, but you can't. Anyone could do that. It's like exactly. No one said that they're doing that so far. How do we know?
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, let's move on to our the ones everyone cares about. Let's go to constructors and drivers. We used to do 3 constructors, top 3 drivers, but we're doing top 4 constructors, top 5 drivers. We'll start with constructors. Who have you got finishing at number 4 for this year?
I'll just say I've gone with McLaren. I think they're solid number 4s. I think although they had a good fight last year, which I don't even remember. Did they get it or did Alpine get it last year?
I think Alpine
I truly cannot remember. Yes, I think they got it, but it was like a close-ish run at the end.
Yes.
But I think they kind of deserved it because Norris scored like 90% of their points, and therefore if they had a semi-competent driver, they would have still had that pretty safe fourth. So much to Alpine's credit for having good drivers in a solid car, despite what Alonso said.
Yes.
It's a lot of this kind of despite that. But look, I think that trend is going to continue. I guess the question is saying, would they get higher than that? Which this is saying not this year. Which is probably going to be similar to what you've said based on your prior prediction. But yeah, I've got them number 4, and I've probably taken enough time talking about it.
Yep. Number 4 was really tough for me. I'm going to say this now. I had 2 in contention, and McLaren was not one of them.
I like that.
Yeah, one of them is a real hopium for me in Alfa Romeo. So I had them initially.
You beauty.
Because I part of me is just like, I just really want to see them like right up there. I really like that team, and I just want to see them do well. At the end of the day, I had to go with my brain and not my heart, and I put Alpine in there for number 4. I think the raw speed of that car is, even though they did have quite a lot of mechanical issues, that is something that they can. Reliability is something that they can fix, whereas the raw pace is something that they cannot. It's not something they can add to or alter at all from now.
Sometimes it's a multi-season thing, right?
Yeah. So I think where that car was in terms of pace, I think they've got a driver lineup that's. I think they're going to push each other quite a lot, for better or worse. So I think that team could very well be back up in 4th. I think 5th onwards it could be very interesting. I think even 4th to 9th, I think will be very, 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 very interesting. I think it could be quite close, but I do think Alpine just has enough at the moment to get that 4th spot. But let's go to the top 3, which I think both of us have the same top 3, just possibly a different order.
You never know.
Who knows? I'll go first. I've got at number 3. I have, to the dismay of a lot of people, I have Ferrari. It was tough. This sort of, when I first put this in, there was a lot of shuffling around of the top 3 as well, as I was trying to look at it and see, does this make sense to me? Does this make sense to me? Looking at this order, this is the one that I look at as like, it just makes the most sense.
Yes,
I think
there's a bit of a logical call with some of these where it's going. As much as Hopium wants to come in, a bit of sense prevails here.
Yeah, and more to that, my prediction that 3 teams will be in contention really late in the season. I don't think Ferrari are going to be that far off. I think they are going to be still incredibly strong. I still think they're going to be winning races, particularly early on. I still think they're outside of reliability and outside of some dodgy strategic calls. I think they still have arguably the strongest, or at the very least, the second strongest car going into, or at the end of last year, possibly going into this year as well. I think they'll start very, very strong. I do just think that the other two teams will, later on in the season, will sort of start to run away with it a bit more. So yeah, that's why I've gone with Ferrari at number 3.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've also gone for Ferrari. I guess I'll save time by saying I very much echo what you say. I also had a prediction that was kind of... Well, no, I haven't really gone into that, but I still think it'll be close, which you might see in part of the drivers as well.
Okay.
So there's a bit of a trend forming there. Right. So but very much echo what you said. And even your prediction on the team's contention thing is one that I totally would agree with and almost put my hand down for as well. So
cool.
Gone with them for number 3 as well.
Beautiful. So have you got it number 2 then? And number 1 and 2. Let's just go 1 and 2, because once you go 2, you know.
Let's not reveal it. Yeah, you never know. I mean, that purple car. Get out of here. See ya. They got no wind tunnel. They're banned. They're cheaters. Ban them from the sport. Number 2, I've gone with Mercedes. Again, and then number 1, yes, Red Bull. Not Racing Point coming back from the dead for number 1. Let's go, baby. So Red Bull 1, Merc 2. You do have to take into contention that there are, in terms of Red Bull, both getting hampered because of the fact they've won 2 years in a row, so they have less testing capability and such, and the fact they were hampered by the slap on the wrist for their exceeding of the cost cap, and I guess potential future exceeding, who knows, I'm not going to talk about that. Yeah. Irrespective of how likely any of that is to affect it, it still feels like that they were just so solid that even if Merc get up to speed, and in a world where they're quite close again, it still just feels like that they're going to... that almost if it was like a repeat of 2021, but it's not Mercedes that are starting ahead, it's Red Bull that are starting ahead. And I think the fact that they had such a close season in 21 and they just came out ahead, even if you argue to say technically overall they didn't come out ahead, but still...
we've talked about it enough.
I guess the only second element I'll say is more on the second drivers that could come into play. And I suppose this is a bit where some of my predictions are still a bit rocky and maybe don't all line up, but then I'm kind of just like, look, I'm not going to spend hours here trying to figure it all out. I'm just going to go look this kind of thing, but then that kind of thing, but maybe 1 or 2 of each side isn't necessarily going to line up right. No, so that's what I've gone anyway. Yeah. So what about you?
Yeah, I have also gone with Mercedes 2, Red Bull 1. I do think that the way I see it, I think despite the fact that Mercedes, towards the end of last season, they did come back and they obviously won a race and they were very much on a steep trajectory up to the top, up to those top 3 teams to be in genuine fights for wins. I do think that overall the Ferrari and the Red Bull will start this year with the fastest cars. I think Mercedes still have a lot to learn about their car. Even when they won Brazil, they're like, we don't understand why we were so fast. I think they've still got a lot of... They still need to understand why they're fast at certain places.
And you'd think they're going with a pretty big evolution of their current car, so they'd need time to get up to it, where you'd expect Red Bull and Ferrari to be more status quo with extra turbo in it, so they're just going from all their knowledge already. Yeah,
so I do think that it'll be like Red Bull, Ferrari again, kind of like last year. They'll be the ones to sort of start very, very strong. I think Mercedes will be a lot closer than they were at the start of last year, obviously. But yeah, the way I see it trending is I think it could very well be like Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes in terms of 1, 2, 3 sort of mid-year. And then I can see Mercedes just sort of being like, whoop, and Ferrari just being like, whoop. So that's where I see it sort of trending. I guess similar to last year. I just think Mercedes are going to do it. They're going to start closer, and once they understand their car, I think it's going to be a very, very, very strong car towards the end of the season, which is what I think will push them past Ferrari in the end. Seeing as you alluded to some funky drivers in your top 5, let's go there. Let's start with number 5. Who've you put at number 5?
I still haven't made up my mind on how this looks because every permutation I do doesn't really work. So as I say, there's almost a caveat of this is a bit of hopium stuff at how cool would this be, even if it kind of contradicts some other things. But again, I couldn't make it map up, so stuff it. I'm aware that you can look at this and go, then why'd you say this other crap? Number 5. I think I'll have a bit of fun with number 5. I think, just because I can, that it'll be a tie between two drivers.
Oh my god!
In terms of points,
holy Henry.
I think it'll be a tie between Sainz and Perez for 5th.
Wow.
But I think Sainz will get it based on countback or however it works. So technically a 5th and a 5th and a half.
Interesting. Oh, I hadn't even considered doing a tie. That's
I thought that was fun.
Yeah,
and I thought, well,
cool.
if I'm going to fuff around, let's have fun.
Oh,
so technically cool. Sainz, but equal points with Checo.
Interesting. Yeah, I had Perez at 5 and I had Sainz at 6, if you want to know.
There you go.
You wanted me to go top
so
6
you should
here.
take all this gear then. Just have it. You clearly believe.
I believe more. Yeah, I'm actually the Sergio Perez fan.
Tear that shirt off. Yeah. Let's see that tattoo.
Yeah, Perez at 5. I think I can't really talk too much without just giving away the rest. So I guess we'll just move on to number 4.
Yes, exactly.
At number 4, I have George Russell. Yeah, I don't really know what to say. I
know we need to keep going. It's a whole summary thing.
Who have you got at 4?
Same.
Russell, beautiful. Moving on. Let's go. Number 3. I have Charles Leclerc.
Oh.
So, yeah, I think he'll be right up again. It's similar to how I said the constructors would go. I think he's going to be right up there in the top 2 probably before I think another driver might make it up there ahead of him in another Mercedes car, the other driver that I haven't mentioned yet.
The third driver that's coming in, Mick Schumacher. Let's go.
He'll be number 1 actually. So I think Leclerc will be a very, very close third. But a third nonetheless. Sounds like you might have gone different.
No, you stole the words right out of my mouth, and I've gone with
boring.
him also in third.
Beautiful.
So you're seeing a bit of a trend here in terms of 3 drivers at the end,
yes.
maybe puffing a bit of that copium,
yes.
hopium rather. A boy in red for 3. I wonder what the other 2 are.
Yeah, who knows?
Elude me on your second place.
Number 2, I've gone with Hamilton. Number 1, I've gone with Verstappen. Again, I think that Red Bull and Verstappen are just going to start too far ahead at the start of the season. I think there's going to be a lot more Verstappen-Hamilton battles towards the end of the season. I do just think Red Bull will be... I think they'll be too far ahead at that point for Hamilton and Mercedes to leapfrog at the end. I also do think, obviously, with this, I do think Hamilton will beat Russell this year. I think now that he has a competitive car, he is a renewed man. I think we saw that even towards the end of the season, despite Russell winning that race. I think it's very clear that Hamilton showed his prowess once again. And I think he is going to come back this year very, very strong. And yeah, he'll take that second place. But yeah, I do think Max will take another championship this year. So curious to see if you've got the same or if you've gone a bit wacky going the other way.
Well, no, the wackiness kind of ends there. I have gone the same
Cut the video.
as you with,
Cut the video. We're done. Yeah.
Your predictions don't make sense. You can't predict that.
True.
Yeah, so, I've gone the same. Again, I think how I can't make up my mind is I'm saying I think it'll be close between the 3 drivers, but then I don't know if the constructors will be as close, but then it kind of has to be as close, and then that kind of... I mean, I don't think it's out of this world to show that Sainz and Perez will be so far behind that they'll kind of be even. I feel like I'm kind of putting Russell in that bucket. I'm less putting Russell down, because if it's going to be somewhat close between Max and Lewis, but Perez is going to be down there, then it might not be as a shoo-in for Red Bull to win the constructors.
Yep.
So then I'm kind of considering that Max and Lewis are going to be doing well. Arguably, Max, I agree, out the gate doing best. I think again it will be Charles chasing him. Maybe falls down a bit and passes the torch to Lewis, hence the three of them. Mega hopium that all three of them could be in contention, but stuff it. That's my bold call, I guess. That's my actual bold call. Psych. Scrap everything else. These are my 3 bold calls. We're starting again. So again, I think it'll be less Russell falling off his game. I think this is copy-paste from the old Sainz Leclerc conversation, which is where Hamilton, if he's actually given some real potential, will actually abuse it, rather than Russell getting up there too. I think Russell is still solid, but I think that Charles will also continue to actually develop. He's had an off season. There's been some management changes and such, which I think will work in his favor. And I see him really knocking it out the gate and going, I'm not going to allow this team to stuff it up like last year when we were so strong and we've shown that we can do it. So that's why I've kind of gone that order, and why I think the more interesting point, I think, is Russell in 4th is the most interesting out of all that, because it's kind of hard to justify when it's not as easy as saying, oh, but old Sainz, Leclerc, it wasn't really fair to compare them in the past, when in reality, yes, Russell was the race winner and he drove sublime that race, but again, it's that whole background kind of trend and motivation that, as we say, we've talked about before, where, I think Leclerc
obviously has he had a pretty notoriously bad relationship with Mattia Binotto, and with Fred Vasseur coming in, he has a very good relationship with him.
Yes.
I think there's a good chance he'll be able to keep more of a cool head, even if decisions happen that he doesn't quite agree with. I think Fred Vasseur is the exact kind of team principal that Charles Leclerc needs to
he certainly seems more collaborative than the more traditional Binotto, which ruled in the more traditional Ferrari kind of head down, this is how we're doing it thing. It's
going to be a very intriguing season. It's even those top 5 drivers, it still looks pretty similar to
copy paste
from last year with some slight differences, but I don't think that's going to take away from what a close season it's going to be. So, but yeah, like I said, let us know, everyone that's watching or listening, let us know your thoughts. Very curious to see if you think there'll be a team that jumps up, or a driver that does particularly well, or someone's going to lose the plot and drop back to 11th like Haas did. Stay tuned for our 2024 drivers predictions as well. We'll be recording that hopefully within the next week as well. And that'll be coming out before preseason testing, which is in, 3 weeks-ish?
Around there,
Roughly
yes.
3 weeks. So, from the time of recording, obviously, whenever this might come out the day before preseason testing, I don't know anymore. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for watching or listening. Stay tuned for the driver's prediction, and we'll see you very, very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Ciao.